Hello, everyone. I am finally making the time, finding the time, whatever you want to say, to make the um, videos for our last two classes. So I've decided to do those in two batches, one for each class. So for this video, I'm going to be working with the buttonhole stitch or the wheel stitch or the blanket stitch. It has many names. We worked with it already in a previous class. And this is the orientation that we learned it in before, where it's just worked in a circle from a singular center point. But today we are going to also work it in different shapes. Here is a teardrop worked in rows. Here's a teardrop worked in a radial pattern, just like this one. So I'm not going to actually show you this, but you can see that it can be done in different ways. This is it worked in a circle. I drew a square in the middle and worked it from a square center and then filled the square with the satin stitch, which we also have covered already in this series. Here it is worked in a circle, but in rows, just like this one, but in a different way. And here it is worked in a grid pattern. So this is worked in lines that then interconnect with each other. So I'm going to go over how to do all of these different versions of the exact same stitch. As you can see, it's one of my favorites because I did it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times on my sampler. I really enjoy this one. I enjoy the versatility. It's super fast and it doesn't use a lot of thread. So you can see on the back here, here's one, here's one, here's one. It really doesn't use a ton of thread. So anyway, a lot of benefits and it's so cute. All right, so let's jump in and get started on different ways of doing this one. All right, so when this stitch is worked in a straight line, like we're going to do here on the grid pattern, again, just to show you, we're going to be doing this version here. I'm going to do a little bigger so it's easier for you to see. It's called the blanket stitch when it's worked in a row. So that's what we're going to do. And for this, we're going to start in our bottom row and we're going to work left to right. You can work in either direction with the blanket stitch. The method stays the same. So when you're working in a row or in a circle, really, the key thing to remember with this stitch, and I know those of you that have worked with me before on this know I'm always like, how do you start this stitch? It's tricky. If you're working it in a row, you want to, you always are going to start on your horizontal line, and then you're going to have these spokes that come down. So your stitch is always going to start on your horizontal, and your spokes are going to go like this. Okay, and you're going to end up with this nice twisty thing up here. So always start on the horizontal that's perpendicular to the way you want your spokes to go. If you're on a circle, that's a little tricky, right? What does that even mean? The horizontal is whatever is working in opposite or perpendicular-ish to your spokes. So if your spokes are coming here, you're going to start on the perpendicular line that's out here. So for our row, we're going to start on this bottom one here. I'm going to start on the perpendicular, which in this case is the corner. Okay, because they both meet here, but I'm going to work across this perpendicular line. If I was starting in the middle here, I would also be starting on the corner. It's the edge, and I would be working across a perpendicular line. Now, if it's helpful to you, you can, if you want to keep them even, you can draw in your spoke lines. I think this is a good idea, especially with this grid, because we want them to be even. So what you can do is you can actually just draw these all the way up. That should be perfect. There we go. All right. Obviously, you can use a ruler if you want to. I'm going to start on the bottom. All right. Now, this twisty bit is going to work across here, and my spokes are going to come down on these lines. So I've come up here on my horizontal line, and the funny thing about this stitch is that I'm now going to go to the bottom of my first spoke. This is where I start. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to come up at the top of my spoke on the horizontal line. Got this loop here. I haven't pulled it tight. I'm going to put the loop around my needle. I'm going to pull up. I'm already stuck on something. You got a knot. Okay. Huh. This is why you always check the back. Now my knot is taut. All right, we're back in business. I'm inside the loop and I'm gently going to pull this taut. You don't want to pull too tight because you don't want to pucker your fabric, but you are going to pull that tight against this, and that's going to hold the stitch in place. I'll do that again. I'm now going to come over one spoke, go in the bottom of the spoke. Now I'm going to come in the top of the spoke. I'm inside the loop. Okay. Now here's the pro move. Go in the bottom of the spoke, come out the top of the spoke in one movement. Now, my thread is going to just go behind in a straight line. I'm not looping it around, just behind the needle. Pull up the needle. That automatically forms that loop. Here we go. Same thing. Depending on the length of your needle and how close you are to the edge of your hoop, the pro move might not work for you. If you're working with a really long needle, sometimes it's tough. Okay. Thread comes directly behind my needle in a line. Okay. Now I'm at the end here. I don't have another spoke to do. So what I'm going to do is this is how I would end this stitch. If I was all done, or in this case, because I'm working inside of this shape, I'm just going to make a tacking stitch. I could, if I was just ending this stitch, I could make my tacking stitch here and that would be the end of it. But I want this line as part of my design. So my tack is going to continue on my horizontal line. And I finished that one. Now, you can come back working from right to left this time, or you can come back over here. And if you're comfortable, because you've sort of got the muscle memory down from this stitch, you can continue to work. I'm going to go from left to right so you can see that it's basically the same. So again, starting on my horizontal line with my needle. Now I'm going to come over to my first spoke. Now the difference here, if I was just going to continue, I would just put my needle here. I'm trying to make this grid pattern that interlocks. So what I'm going to do, let's see here. We're going to wait till the next one because this sort of hits the corner. So I'm just going to go down at the bottom of my first spoke. I'm going to come here, come up at the top of my first spoke. Got my loop, it's around my needle. Pull that tight. All right, so now this one I'm working, I've got all of this thread down here where my needle would go in. So what I'm going to do, because I want this to look like a grid, is I'm going to put my needle in underneath the corner of this. I'm not penetrating this thread. I'm being very careful not to penetrate this thread, in fact. This thread that's already here, I don't want to split those. But I can still do the pro move. I can come up at the top of that spoke. Now, same thing, I'm just working in a different direction. My thread just goes behind my needle in a line. And there I go. Okay, I want to keep this consistent in the way this looks, so I'm just going to make sure that I'm going to the left of this corner, not to the right. If you accidentally go to the right, it's no big deal. find it easier to work from left to right on this stitch, honestly. That might just be because I'm right-handed. Okay, one more. This goes behind. So I'm just going to continue to work in this manner until I get to the edge, and I'll do another tacking stitch over here. Go into my next spoke. We'll go ahead and finish out this line. Now this one I can make a decision. Do I want it to go sort of in the corner here, or do I want it to go outside? There's a lot of finagling when you're working in funny shapes. I'm going to go here. Now this is where I started my stitch. My needle is coming back right next to the knot where I started. And if you probably can't see, but I have actually caught my knot, and there is one of the 6 threads wrapped around my needle. I want to avoid that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sort of find a good spot where I can come in where it's going to look nice, but I'm not splitting my thread. And I found one. Great. I'm a little close here, so I'm not going to use the pro move. I'm going to come up here, get my loop around. Great. Okay, and now I'm on my last one. So now I'm going to do my tacking stitch and pull that down. Okay. Now, let's say I'm run out of thread, or maybe I want to change colors, or I need to put this down and walk away for a couple of hours. So what I can do is I'll just knot this off here. And I'm going to do 2 on this one because it's kind of a big stitch. Okay, and now this is good to go until I come back to it, or if I switch threads or whatever I want to do, and I'll just start over here in the same way. Now, this, you can see the edge is an open grid. This doesn't naturally work in the edge. So on this one here, I just did a circle of back stitch around the edge after my grid was complete to give that an edge. You can do any line stitch that we've learned or that you know around the edge of that. Okay, so now I want to move on to doing this in rows, but on a curve. And so the way I did this here, this is going in a different direction, is that I worked 2 rows of blanket stitch on a curved line, and they are going the same way in that the parallel line is here at the bottom with my radial lines going up, and again, another one that just mimics that. Okay. For this one, this little, like, it looks like a yin yang, and this, when it's drawn, I did it like this. And instead of, so I did 2 rows, but they're like a mirror of each other instead of being stacked. So that'll be a little more clear when we do it. But I just want to show you, you can really play with this in so many different ways. So the other thing to think about when you do these is, how do you want your spokes to go? Do you want your spokes to be completely parallel to each other? So for that, you could actually draw, just like we did here, you could draw your parallel lines in like this. Okay. Or do you want them to sort of radiate out and be at different angles? So let's say we want this to be more like it's radiating from a circle. So I'm going to say more like sun rays coming out. So I'm going to draw this in. And I can see on this one that my horizontal line is the outside. So I'm going to say like this. Flip this around, and I want it to go the same way. Oh, I did that backwards. That's okay. Instead of coming out like this, they're going inward. Let's see what happens. I don't know what that's going to look like. Be cool. Maybe it's a happy accident. Woo, that's close. That's okay. Let's see what happens. All right. So let's start with this one. And again, this outer edge is going to be what I'm calling the horizontal because it goes perpendicular to my spoke. So I'm just going to pick a spot here. Okay. Starting on the edge, check my knot. Nope. Huh. I don't know how that happened. That's okay. We're having all the luck today. All right. Retie this. I don't know what that was. Okay. That out of here. Knot is taut. Here we go. Again, back in business. So I've come up on my horizontal line and I'm going to go over one spoke and come in at the base of my spoke. Pro move, coming up at the top. This is going to slip behind my needle. There we go. Now I'm moving on to the next spoke. Okay, here we go. Moving on to the next spoke. Pro move up to the top of the spoke, slips behind. And see how fast this stitches. Super quick. Now, obviously, the closer you put your spokes together, the more of a solid fill you're going to get. So if you're looking for a big block of color that's like really intensely colored, you're going to put you could put 3 spokes in the space where I'm only putting 1. Works the same. Okay, so I'm just being really careful with my tension. Okay, the other thing is the closer that these are together, the more this is going to look circular. This sort of looks like a series of dashes, but that's okay. Just going to get to the edge here and turn around. I'm not going to make you watch me do this whole thing. I just, whoops. Want you to see what I'm going to do. I'm just going to work this whole thing in a circle, but again, instead of working from one central point, I'm just working down the line here. But when I get to the corner, so that when you get into these tiny spaces, it gets a little bit tricky. You just sort of have to figure out, that your lines meet, your horizontal meets your spoke. All right, so I'm down in the corner here. I'm continuing, my horizontal and my spoke are the same. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm not going to try to do the pro move because it's such a tiny space. So I'm just trying to make sure that I've got a little space in between. My needle's not going to come through. This is a wide weave fabric, so it's possible. I did it. Hooray. Okay. I got lucky. Sometimes when you come up right next to it, you'll sort of tear the fabric and you'll end up just making a hole in your needle will come out because the hole you went in and the hole you came out end up being the same. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to try to have my needle come back up at the bottom of my spokes in the same spot because that is going to be, again, I'll tear a hole and it will make a mess and I'll catch my threads. And I think it also looks interesting to have this line in between. So instead of coming up exactly here, I'm actually just going to draw. If it helps, you can draw or you can eyeball it. A second line that I'm going to use as the base. So because I'm working in a circle, I've already come up here on the edge of my horizontal. Okay. That was a tiny one, but I managed the pro move. All right, and moving right along, coming in at the base of the next spoke. You can do this in any shape. It doesn't have to be a circle. This stitch is traditionally worked in a circle because it's literally how you make a buttonhole. But you can do it any way you want. You can do it in a triangle. I'll draw it on paper for you. Oops. All right, so my tail got as long as my thread, so I need to shorten that. I'm just going to give that a little tug. All right, this is where this meets. This is where I was like, oops, I made a little mistake, but that's okay. I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to come in here. Because I want to be really particular about where I come back up here so I don't catch my threads, I'm not going to try the pro move. I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way here. Okay, and I'm coming up in the middle because I think that will look better. Inside my loop. That worked. There we go. Okay, moving right along. Okay, so I've come to the end of the spokes that I drew in my original design. If I were to just finish this off with a tacking stitch, I'd get a weird straight line over here instead of a circle because that's too big of a gap. So I'm just going to add another because I can. Okay, now, you know what? Now if I do it, it's going to also get another one. So I'm just going to add one more little thing in here. Again, don't be afraid to be like, that didn't work. Let's try something else. Okay, that's good. That's better. So now to finish off my circle, I'm gonna come, because this has this wrap look, if I just tack this in, that's gonna look kind of funny, I think. So I'm just gonna push my needle under there. I'm not penetrating the fabric, I just went around it. And I'm gonna pull this and it's gonna give it the same look. Okay. Ooh, that looks kind of funny there. So you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna give it a fake spoke. Done. Love it. Okay, we're gonna knock that off and move on to the next. All right, for this one, we're going to work in two rows. I'm going to move through this fairly quickly. The dog says hello because you've already seen how this stitch works, but I just want to show you how it ends up. I'm going to start in the corner here. This is also how you start on a funny curve. This looks like I'm starting on the bottom, but I'm actually going to be working with this row here. This is my horizontal. These are my spokes. So it's on a curve, but I promise this is my horizontal. I'm going to move to the next first spoke. Go under here. Again, I'm working fairly large with the spaces between these spokes because I want you to be able to see. So again, for a nice rounded curve, you would want to work a little closer together. Okay, so moving right along with this. I'm at the end of this row and I'm going to finish it off by doing my tacking stitch down here. Okay, and now I could turn this around and continue on to work in have my horizontal follow around, but instead I'm going to work in two parallel rows. So for that, I'm going to knot this off. and continue in the next row. Okay. Now it's just working out. I'm sort of running out of thread here, so I'm just gonna take a say, oh, that's a good stopping point for this thread, and I'll start the next row with a fresh one that's gonna be long enough for me. So I could start over here and work right to left, or work left to right. I'm just more comfortable working left to right, so that's what I'm gonna do. And again, I'm gonna do what I did before, where I'm gonna draw in a line that mirrors or mimics the one that I have above, because trying to come in at the exact same space is gonna cause a lot of trouble as far as getting it all knotted up. So I'm gonna come here on my horizontal. I'm gonna come to my first spoke. Go behind. So I'm just going to end up with a different effect. This is the same stitch, but worked, instead of in a circle, worked in two parallel rows. That just gives me a very different effect, because one, I'm going to end up with these sort of teeth, like the teeth of a comb down here, instead of a solid edge on my shape. Now you could always go in and do a back stitch or something like we did with the circle, but that is not necessary. I think it's an interesting aesthetic to have it be open like this. And if you don't love this sort of gap here, you can just go back at the end and add a fake straight stitch in. We love faking it till we make it. All right, last one. Here we go. Tiniest pro move ever. Okay, I'm going to tack that right here to finish this off. I just want to make sure I'm going over this horizontal stitch to lock it in place. Okay, and then I'm like, yeah, I want to fix that. So I'm going to just jump over here. Or if I don't want to have a big pink string going back over here, what I can do is I can take my, I'm going to lead with the eye of my needle, and I'm just going to slip this under here. Wrap this here, and I'm just sort of faking it till I make it, just to keep that out of my way. Now I've come along the back without making a mess. Come up here, and I want to give that wrap look, so I'm going to slip my needle under here and do a little fake tack. Or it's not a fake tack, it's a real tack. Oops. Okay, and that's going to finish that off. So you can see again over here, I worked these much more closely together. So this is really more of a fill stitch when you do it this way, but it's the same idea. Okay. So I was going to work this one for you, but I feel like you probably have the idea here. So if you're going to work, say, a circle with a triangle on the inside, you're going to start at the top of one of your spokes on the horizontal, and then you're going to come in at the next spoke. And you're going to end up with your stitches like this. And you're just going to use this, just like you did this line here, as your guide, in and out on the triangle and the circle. You can do this on a triangle. You can lay this out any way you want. You could radiate from the center, or, I mean, you can really go crazy with creating fun shapes this way. Just draw your spokes in ahead of time. You can eyeball it if you want to, but. Okay, so this one takes a little bit of practice, especially with the pro move, but I think there's just a lot of fun things that you can do to have fun with this stitch. This is fun for making wonky flowers. You can fill your center in with French knots or any of the fill stitches that we did. In our next video, if you weren't in the class the other night, we're going to do some fun woven stitches where you can make patterns on the inside. So that's a fun thing to do. So have fun with the wheel stitch / blanket stitch, and I'll see you in the next video.